Okay, so let's start with why I wanted to do this podcast. The main thing is I'm just tired of one Canadians being sort of underappreciated in like media, documentaries, interviews. So one of the things I wanted to do was sort of showcase Canadian players. So the first thing I wanted to do was the first episode. I said we wanted to introduce ourselves, and I mean, since it's introduction, you're going to be basically the first Canadian player we're showcasing. So I'm going to ask a few questions. At the end, maybe you can ask me some questions so I can introduce myself a bit more, or maybe I can sort of talk about my moments and you can comment on it.
Yeah, we can do that, and then kind of segue into what we really want to talk about, like the theme of this podcast or this potential series of podcasts, basically.
So the other thing I wanted to go into was just sort of design decisions, modern games, just sort of philosophies behind game design or fighting game design, and what are our thoughts of it? Maybe some interesting approaches that may not have been considered, or maybe approaches worth considering.
Sure. I mean, we're seeing more of those like on YouTube these days. Like,
definitely a lot.
We've got the guy with the channel called Theory Fighter on YouTube. Fighter, and you'll find it. And then JM Crofts, he does this great series about how he basically breaks down like retro, like now what we would consider retro fighting games, like Marvel 2, Strike, CVS 2, etc., etc. So these things have been popping up more and more on YouTube because I suppose more people have access. Yeah, more people, I guess, have access to these games or have I should say, want to explore these games. It's like they never grew up with these games back in the day, and so they're like, oh, these games are cool.
First thing, let's start with you. How long have you been playing fighting games? What's your history?
I mean, I've been playing fighting games since, oh gosh, like Street Fighter 2 for the Super Nintendo.
And that was obviously, not competitive, right? I love playing on the Super Nintendo myself.
Yeah, I mean, when I played on the Super Nintendo, it was mostly me versus CPU, that kind of thing. See if you can beat Bison or Dictator now, as they call him, on level 8, that kind of thing. And I must have been 91, 92, 11 or 12 then. So it's like one of those ages where you're kind of a little too young to go to arcades. But the odd occasion for the mall, or you go to a Zellers, like, remember, this is 91. Street Fighter 2 was the biggest arcade game that had come out at that point.
Absolutely.
So every arcade, every mall, every department store had a Street Fighter 2. I think the first time I saw Street Fighter 2 in the arcade, or an arcade cabinet, I should say, was Zellers at a mall. So it was like they had two machines. They had Final Fight, at Street Fighter 2.
Nice.
I started playing Final Fight there at the mall, and then eventually I was like, what's this? Street Fighter 2. So when your folks allowed you to spend, say, 5 or 10 minutes at the games while they do their shopping and such, it was like, okay, first I tried Final Fight, and that was cool. Eventually I was like, Street Fighter 2, let's try that one. So that's how it started.
Nice. And I love just hearing about the old arcade culture, even if it's fighting games or not. What other games were you interested in other than fighting games?
I had what was called the Famidisc system, the Japanese version of the Nintendo. So we played the Famidisc games, which more or less were like most of them were like light versions of what you got the cartridge games. Because I remember I played platformers like the Japanese version of I should say what became the US version of Super Mario 2. And there's a whole great story about
the Doki Doki Panic.
Exactly, yeah, that one. I remember trying to describe to my friends, it's like I have that game, but it's not quite like that, and they're just like, what the hell? What the hell are you talking about? 'Cause all they knew was the NES. All they knew was the NES version of.
Hmm.
Super Mario 2. No, that's the thing. I'm like, I have that, but it's not quite the same, and they had no idea.
Hmm. Yeah, no, I only found out about Toki Toki Panic maybe in like middle school when the internet was starting to be a thing.
Jeez, yeah, yeah. Because back in the day, there was no internet, right? There
Hmm.
was no, you couldn't. It wasn't like eBay where you could readily pull up. It's like, oh, Japanese Nintendo, and then you'd get a ton of listings for, say, Famicom, Famidisc, and there's no eBay. I don't think even specialty stores were that big a thing back then.
Hmm.
They were very, very rare. Like you had to be really in the know to kind of have an idea of how to get specialty things like Japanese import games and things like that. Like since I didn't grow up in Canada, that like had access to a Famidisc very, very early. So that was my gaming start. So yeah,
Nice. It was a disk system where you loaded things onto like the Nintendo proprietary floppy disk, right?
that's it. And then you bought discs, and then you played the games from the discs, and et cetera, et cetera.
And you could wipe them. So you grew up in Hong Kong, right?
That's right.
So did they actually have those kiosks where you rewrite the discs there, or is that how it worked there?
Never seen them because I got the Famidisc system pretty young. I think I was about 8 to 9 years old, or even younger than that, and it's like one of those things where your folks just came home and one day and they're just like, "Hey, we got this for you. Try this." And I was like, "Whoa, what is this? Famidisc? Okay." And then if my folks felt like it, then every so often get a new game or something like that. But it was never a thing like take you to a mall,
Yeah.
go to game. So personally, I've never seen anything like this. I mean, the disc kiosks. I do remember in the Famidisc manual, they were advertising things like that. Like you saw those instruction books, and they have the sort of anime cartoon type things advertising and say, "Hey, you can go to a mall, go to this kiosk where you can get the games." And it was like, I think that's how I kind of
But you never actually saw one yourself.
know firsthand.
You're actually cutting out a little bit. Do you have? I don't know if you have.
That was better.
Okay, perfect.
Okay, yeah, that's better.
Okay, so I remember when we were in Rochester, one of the things that completely surprised me was that you were playing X-Men on one, and you 1CC'd it. Well, technically you had quote help until I don't remember who you were playing with, but he like died pretty early, and you basically ended up finishing the game by yourself. What?
That was the almost 1CC run. I can 1CC it, but I need a good character, like a one of the top tier. Yeah, but go on.
Yeah. So what arcade? So was that your main arcade game since you could 1CC it? I've always wanted to 1CC games, but I could never do it except for like fighting games.
Actually, that wasn't my main arcade game because I started playing that back in high school. Actually, because where I played, well, like where I learned to play Street Fighter was this high school. I mean, this arcade in the mall that was like about 5-10 minute walk from my high school. So it was like, oh, lunchtime. So that one had like Hyper Fighting, Super Turbo, Darkstalkers 1 at the time. I think even for a while they had Street Fighter 1, the 6-button version, so not the punch pad version. And another game they had there was X-Men. And so one of my friends and I and I'll give my friend this at the time. Like he started to really figure out the game, and so I learned from him. Like he was the one who figured out that say in X-Men the arcade game, that Storm was really good. Storm could beat up on a lot of the bosses really easily. And so he was the one who started to really kind of figure the game out, and then we're just like, okay, let's keep playing this, and then let's see what else can we figure out, and then it was just like just went from there.
Oh, that's pretty cool. It's always nice to have somebody to learn with. I love experimenting and learning games. I think but the only arcade games I could 1CC was probably fighting games, and the other one is like Point Blank. But
Yeah, the gun game. Yeah.
but I've never even done like a real rail shooter. Like I've never even 1cc'd House of the Dead. That's one of my goals. I want to 1cc something eventually. I've come close, but I haven't actually completed a 1cc in a non-fighting game or non-point blank game.
Yeah, because back in the day, because for a lot of us, like who grew up in arcades, like games were expensive, man. Like it's like quarter, or if you were lucky, a quarter a game, but more usually 50 cents per game. And then if they were generous, it was only a quarter to continue. But you had to keep spending money to play games, and so it was either that you figured it out yourself really fast, or if you were lucky like I was, you had friends who were willing to just kind of experiment and play around with the game alongside you, and it wasn't like survival of the fittest or anything like that. It was just like, okay, let's get through the game and let's see what kind of stuff we can figure out.
Yeah.
So I was kind of really fortunate that way. Like I had friends who were just like, let's play this game, let's try to finish this, and let's try to figure things out.
Yeah, and figuring stuff out is fun. I know. If I don't know if you've ever played or heard of the game Flanex for the Super Nintendo, like the guy with the old guitar on the cover, but it's actually like the plane shooting game. Yeah.
It was like a horizontal scroller shoot 'em up.
Yeah, so I grew up playing that, and actually my dad actually played it a lot as well, and of course my brother, he was the one who basically owned the Super Nintendo. But we found out that on most of the stages there was like a safe spot on like the bottom corner.
Oh, nice.
It's like design.
Yeah, but that's the kind of environment. Like it can be arcade or it can be console. Like if you had family and friends who had the same gaming interest and they were willing to just game with you and figure things out. Like that's the kind of environment that I think tends to breed, I guess, what would now be called like the pro gamer, excuse me.
All right, so let's move on to fighting games. How did you actually start getting to, or rather, we were talking about fighting games, but how did you start becoming competitive?
Well, I mean, it was really just me trying to. I brought up the arcade near my high school, right? So, and of course, in every arcade, in regards to fighting games, there was always the king of the arcade, like the guy that no one could ever beat. And so everybody tried to beat this guy, including me. I think his name was Tom. Like he was going to some local college that was kind of close to the arcade, and he would just take his lunchtime and drive there to play games and beat up everyone in Street Fighter.
I just want to clarify something. When did you move to Toronto? Because oftentimes when you're speaking, I don't know if you're speaking about Hong Kong or if you're speaking about Toronto. When did you move?
I actually didn't. Oh, I moved to Canada when I was 8.
Okay.
So for a kind of timeline, so I was mostly console gaming, like before high school. So like 8 until say like 14. Like
so if we moved when you were 8, yeah, high school is definitely in Canada then.
Yeah, and then but even then I was living in Mississauga, so
that counts. It counts now, sort of. Right.
Yeah. But even then, the Mississauga competition, I don't think it was still kind of less fierce. I want to say than in Toronto. I mean, like everybody knows that the one Toronto OG is Dave Spence.
Right.
He played mostly in Toronto, so that's how he got so good. But anyways, back to how I started gaming competitively. So it was like, yeah, just trying to beat the king of the arcade. But the funny thing about this guy was that, like, remember what I said, like how fortunate it is to find someone who's willing to just game with you and teach you things or show you things. Like, this was the guy. Like he'd be like when you're a kid starting in Street Fighter, sometimes all you read was like GamePro stuff. Because GamePro had those Street Fighter 2 guides back then, and one of the things they really liked to advertise was the combos, like the good old Guile 4 Fears combo in the corner.
Yeah, and I remember I still have a GamePro that's showing like Ken, like and his like crushing like TOD and stuff.
Yeah, And of course, when you play the CPU, you try to do those things, and sometimes it worked because sometimes the CPU would cooperate with you. But of course, like when you first played against a human, then you start finding out that you can't just combo people because they won't let you. And so I think one of the first things he told me was, "How are you going to combo me if you can't get near me?" And I was kind of like, "Huh, okay." And then I think I asked him a couple of more questions and just play him.
Nice.
Because he was the guy that I could learn from.
Right.
Like, even though I kept getting beat down.
The original wise sage. Because you're that guy for most of us now.
Well, kind of. I'm getting to the point where I'm almost like, I like to think I'm kind of like the old guy, maybe like the Freddie Roach to Manny Pacquiao.
Yeah, or like the sports commentators or coaches. They don't play anymore because they can't do it anymore, but they still got that knowledge.
Yeah, exactly. It's like you can't play anymore because you're kind of past that point, but you can still tell what's the up and comers. It's like, no, you got what it takes. If you do this, then you can win. So get out there, that kind of thing.
And you can still definitely hold your ground. I remember one of the last tournaments we had before coronavirus, right? The one that I'm super proud of, where I just barely almost beat Justin Wong, and Justin Wong went to either play against you or Josh, right? And then Justin ended up losing that one, and the grand finals was you versus Josh. So you can still definitely hold your ground even against like the experienced good players who are still pretty sharp.
Well, it was because in that tournament it was Josh who took out Justin. Because Josh he and we all know how Josh eventually got that TOL spot, right?
Yeah.
And big ups to Josh, man. I mean,
absolutely.
He started playing with me and a few of the other GTA guys back in like the 2000 to 2010 era, and then he kept playing. He stuck with it, and he got better. And I mean, now I think he's got like the best tournament record out of all the Toronto guys.
He's probably up there. Like I still think it's it's you, Josh, and Oz, right? I think Pestro, if he keeps playing, he'll probably get up there as well.
Yeah, and the other guy on the up and up is Hoji.
Oh yeah.
Online. But,
yeah.
I mean, Hoji, we could talk about other players. In a future episode, but as far as I'm concerned, like Josh right now has the best overall record.
Mm-hmm.
So I got to give it up to him.
Yeah.
Marvel 2 and CVS 2.
And I remember you saying that the CVS 2 people thought if you can play CVS 2, you can play ST, which questionable.
I mean, see, that's like a whole debate around. It's like what does it take to be good at Street Fighter? It's like that kind of nebulous thing that people like to call skill, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, like you've seen that skill gap video done by Gerald of Core A.
Mm-hmm.
Like he made a really good point in that video about like what exactly constitutes skill.
Mm-hmm.
And he showed a ton of clips from like Super Turbo, Street Fighter V, Third Strike, Marvel 2, and he summed it up better than I could. Like all those games, like all that footage, all those matches, it's like that constitution of what people consider skill.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like if you want to kind of argue about that, then it kind of gets into these kind of really foolish arguments about like what really constitutes skill, because one, everyone has a somewhat different opinion on what's skillful. Like partly, I think it depends on what kind of games you grew up with and what kind of games you like.
Mm-hmm.
And then secondly, what constitutes skill? Like a lot of it is transferable. Some of it isn't.
Yeah.
Like some very specific matchup type knowledge. Like say like what do you do against DJ in Super Turbo if you were Guile? Like that kind of thing is very specific. It's probably Super Turbo applicable only, but a lot of other things isn't. Like the other nebulous thing is like, how do you know what to do at the right time?
Mm-hmm.
Like that's a very kind of abstract. Can you really find that kind of thing, that kind of knowledge. Not really. I mean, it was awesome because he seems to know what to do at the right time most of the time. But you like how do you figure out how he's gonna know when to go for that psychic uppercut?
Right.
It's kind of hard to describe.
Yeah.
To explain.
And I always feel bad for players who only played Third Strike and and try to transfer for other games, because there's a large portion of the Third Strike skill set is only applicable to Third Strike.
Right.
So I always feel sorry for them when they're trying to learn a new game.
Yeah, and to an extent, I find that the flip side is equally applicable as well. Because if you go in again, like if you go into Third Strike trying to play Super Turbo, then you find that it doesn't work.
But more things from Super Turbo transfer into Third Strike than going the other way around, though.
Yeah. I suppose. But I believe that I can find at least one Third Strike player who might debate you on that. But that's a whole other discussion we can have another day.
Yep. So I want to finish off with a couple more questions. One, what do you think most people is consider your greatest accomplishment in either generally fighting games or ST? And what do you think is personally your greatest accomplishment if it's different?
Okay. Well, it's got to be actually. I'll say this. I think it was like I would say it's not even in Super Turbo. It was in CVS 2, if you want to believe that.
Okay.
So it was just like one tourney, and it wasn't. I don't think it ever ended up being. It shouldn't have been as big a deal as it was because it was up in Brampton. Like it was up in one of those mall arcades in Brampton.
Right.
I think all the big CVS 2 heads were there, like Nagata Lock, Ratio 1 Beatdown. If you've never heard of him, he was probably our best CVS 2 player.
Cool.
During the 2000 to 2010 era.
I've heard you talk about him over the years.
Yeah, like this guy, like he probably played the game. He probably put in at least three times, 4 times as much time in that game as I did. Like he could do all the RC. He knew how to play all the grooves, all the characters, etc., etc. And I think he beat Daigo he knocked out Daigo in one of the Evos that he went to. So he did that.
Nice.
And yeah, so this Brampton tourney, and I remember this and for some reason, like a couple of the Montreal guys came down to this Brampton tourney too.
So random.
Yeah, it's crazy because again, this was supposed to be some like random Brampton Mall CVS2 tourney, and for some reason the Montreal guys showed up. and so the one thing I remember about this, right, was that I got knocked into losers pretty early because I faced a Montreal player, and Montreal players were very, very strong in CVS2. So they knew what they were doing. And so I was like, okay, I'm in the losers. And then I find out I had to play Ratio 1 Beatdown in the losers bracket.
Oh.
Yeah, so I was like, because there's a lot of times like he'd show up at at one of the Mississauga arcades, and I practiced with him, and you know we'd play, and then he usually got the wins over me because he put more time to the game. Like I think he was the one who figured out how to RC consistently on the kind of crappy Mississauga cabinet. Anyway, so you know I find out I have to play Ratio 1 Beatdown, and it's like okay, you know what? I'll just give it my best shot, and we'll see how it goes. And I somehow beat him. I eliminated him.
Nice.
Yeah. So it's like a game that I was kind of like more or less a part-time player in. You know, not putting in as much time as say like JS Master or Ratio 1 Beatdown, and I somehow eked out a win.
Nice. Did you end up John Choing that tournament? Did you win it?
No, I didn't. I think I lost the next match that I took out a Ratio 1 Beatdown. Like I lost the next one.
Mm-hmm. But it still probably was a big moment.
But yeah, because also keep in mind the other thing I have to note is that like in CVS2 I didn't really play I didn't know how to RC that well because I didn't practice at it, so obviously I wasn't going to be as good at it. So So, and the characters I kind of gravitated to were more or less mid tier, like Ryu, Ken.
Mm-hmm.
But Ken, I think Ken eventually got a lot better when they found out that you could do things like the roll cancel funky kick and things like that.
Right.
And Sagat. So I think the team like Ryu, Ken, and Sagat, I beat racial ones. It was like I think it was.
Of course, you pick a team of Shotos.
Yeah, because I mean, I was kind of like Sakura. Yeah, she's kind of OP. It's like show, custom combos, that kind of thing. But you had to practice those. Like if you weren't practicing those in training, well, you weren't going to get them. And I was kind of like, yeah, do I want to put that much time in? Not really. So
Shotos.
yeah, you stick with what you know.
Yeah.
Even though what you know might not get you that many wins.
Mm-hmm. Were these at this time were these candy cabs or were these stand-up cabs?
They were stand-ups.
Okay, that's awesome.
These were like North American arcades, so like
awesome
stand-ups. Maybe in a good arcade, you'd find a big blue every now and then,
Mm-hmm.
that kind of thing.
Nice.